always pleased to be on a panel where the women outnumber the men. Okay, I'm assuming you all know everyone on stage, so I'm not going to do very, very detailed introductions. And I think I just want to kind of jump right into it. I've promised them that we will all get into a nice big fight about the business of books. And so before we begin, one of the things I wanted to do was kind of get opening remarks from each of you about, just quite simply, what do you treat this as, this industry, this career, the place where you work and the thing that you do all day, every day, what do you treat it as? Do you treat it as passion, life's calling, vocation, business? Urvashi?
I take it as the love of my life.
And I've always been in love with Urvashi, though she's denied it. And
you have to make a public declaration.
I also have another confession that just when she got onto the stage, she called me a bandar. She said something about being a bandar between something or the other.
I told him to sit in the middle, and he said, why? Because I'm the token male. And I said to him, a Hindi little kahawat that we have, which the people who speak Hindi will understand, which is Aas Paas Bandar, Beech Mein Ramchandar.
What does that mean?
It's very a bit insulting, my grandmother taught me.
I told you, bandar.
But as a feminist, I shouldn't say it. But it means all around you are monkeys, and in the middle is Ramchandar. But Bandar and Ramchandar.
But never mind.
Yeah.
It's my life's work, really. So one treats it and brings to it a certain commitment and passion.
Right. So we have love of my life, life's work.
I think I would agree with both. Because being a publisher is something you don't close your office and then it's gone.
Yeah.
It's something which you do every day, and most of the people you meet and talk to are in the business, or are your authors or your would-be authors, and so it's exactly that, the passion of life.
It's a passion. Okay. So, which brings me to my next question, which I'm going to direct at you, Naveen, because I think we've talked about this in the past as well. Do you think we over-romanticize this? Do you think that in some way we look at publishing so much as sort of life's work and love of our lives and this great passion and a vocation and a calling rather than an actual business? And does that over-romanticization and the whole sort of the trope of the penniless artist, the struggling cultural icon, does that trope do us damage in any way?
I don't think there is such a trope, really, and I don't think there's such a thing as over-romanticizing. I mean, I know what you're saying, I understand and appreciate it. It's just that I have no problem with romance, and there is a romantic nature to this vocation for business or shared passion or life's work, all of which I don't think it's always accompanied by chest beating how difficult it is, or how we make the profits and the losses match or not match, or whether it's, I see it as a extension of one's desire to do what we want to do and do it every day, and that's making books.
Yeah.
Really. The rest of it is pure logistics of how you make it work. Each one of us makes it work. We have lots of different ways of doing it, individual idiosyncrasies, if you want to, that we bring to it, or individual passions that we want to bring to it. But in the context of, I do see it as a calling, not in religious terms, but it's something that literally calls to you to do in a certain way. And I came into it from the theatre, which was very ephemeral. When the first book happened, that was the first tangible something. So there is a kind of tangible quality to this. There's a magic to it too, on how you consistently make this happen, despite all of what you said, that the odds appear to be stacked against a certain kind of publishing.
I want to go back to a phrase that Naveen just said, which is that somehow we make it work. How are we doing this? Urvashi, do you want to jump in here and say, how are we making it work? Where is the money coming from if in an industry that feels, for the most part, passion-led?
I think just to go back a little bit to the question you put to Naveen, I think it's a great privilege to be able to love the work that you do. I don't think that many of us who enter publishing bring to it an expectation of romance. But if you do happen to actually really love that work and be excited by being in the presence of new thinking and new writing and new knowledge every day, then it's difficult not to love that work. And that brings me to your question of how do we make it work. I think we make it work, it's very different depending on the size of the publishing house, where the money is coming from and so on. So I'm speaking from the point of view of an independent publisher who has made it work without any funds from anywhere, who's made it work purely on the strength of the books that we publish and the time and effort and passion and so on we put into it. Now you make it work by redefining notions of success. So the success is not money. It doesn't necessarily equal money. Yesterday, I forget who it was who was talking, said, I think it was Ravi Singh, who said, yeah, we want to make a profit, but even a little profit is okay. So, you know, even a little profit is okay. I mean, I don't have a target of 100 crores. If I make 300,000 rupees profit in 1 year, I know that I'm breaking even. And the little money will go somewhere. And next year round, it will give me the excitement to continue and the challenge to continue, maybe make a little more. But it's not driven by that. It's driven by the fact that you have a commitment to knowledge, literature, information, writing, thinking, ideas. You want to find the best way to put them out there. The form of your chosen profession is a book or printed pages or possibly an e-book or possibly some other forms that you can think of. And you make it work by putting time, money, effort. But of course, if you were to put that time and match it to a profit and loss thing, it would not work. So for example, my time is, I put in my time. I don't actually get paid or get paid, and all my colleagues get paid decent wages, but less than they would earn if they were working in, say, your publishing house. You know,
or even in corporate communications or something like that.
So for all of us, somewhere it's enough to earn what we need, and it's enough to be able to continue, and that's what makes it work. I don't know if that answers your question.
I think it does, but that thing that you said, which also Ravi said yesterday, which is that, I mean, we need to redefine what we mean when we say success, but we also, a little profit is also a profit. But is it always easy to get even to little profit or even to break-even point? Because the odds genuinely are stacked against us. We are not competing with other publishers so much as we're competing with coffee shops and Netflix. We're competing with free content on the internet all day, every day. We're competing with lowering attention spans. We're competing with social media. The competition is not coming from the same base, but from multiple bases. So I wonder if you can talk to us a little bit about what it's like for you it is a completely different readership that you're working with. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you approach this problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think the competition with social networks and all the new entertainment people can have, which had been really exaggerated, and now you see that we came to a sort of plateau, you know, where consumption of these things goes on, of course, but the books are resisting, and the book trade, I think is in a more, I would say, optimistic trend now than it was a couple of years ago when people were saying, you know, there will be no physical books anymore because it's finished. And I remember going to, I don't know, many debates and book fairs and discussions, and everybody was saying, you know, next year we won't be here anymore. And this is proved wrong, you know, I mean, to our utmost pleasure. When people complain about how expensive books are, especially in France, where the book price is regulated, so it's a really ridiculous thing to say. But if you compare it with anything else, it's still one of the cheapest ways to acquire knowledge, to share knowledge, because you can buy a book and share it with ever so many people. I mean, I think there's quite a few indicators which can make us really optimistic and think the world a second time. Of course, we all know that some years are more difficult than others, and then suddenly, you know, divine surprise, you find the incredible bestseller that nobody was expecting, and then it will save you for a few years or a few months. I mean, it's a very exciting job, because you never know what tomorrow will be, you know. And there's nothing as a predictable success for a book. You get the manuscript, you like it, you publish it. You know it's a risk, but it's I repeat it, exciting.
Mansi, can I ask a question to Vera? Of course. Yeah. So I think actually what intrigues me is both of you, you and Naveen, are very differently placed in the publishing world, and both of you have made the kind of publishing you do work in a different environment. So you living and working out of France at one point, publishing in French, but bringing Polish writing and other European writing into a different market. Naveen living and working out of Calcutta and publishing world literature and taking it to the world. Both making those things work to make a space for something in an environment which is open, I mean, not necessarily open to it, but very different. I'm just wondering how you make that work.
One, I completely agreed with what you said earlier, this business of commerce with a ceiling, right? What are you happy with and the proportions you're happy with. The other thing that I've discovered, which I link to romance, is you open up many war fronts to confuse the enemy. The enemy is usually the marketplace, which you cannot claim to know or understand no matter what kind of research you do, right? Which brings me back to the fact that the kind of books we do, we cannot actually come up with, like we're often asked, who is your target audience and so on and so forth. It's very difficult. So one of the fronts I opened up some 30 years ago to do things differently was this partly bristly response to being told by the American West that we should only publish for our country, that they can cherry pick from our lists, but we cannot buy into theirs. So we decided that we would set up something there in their countries as a statement. And if our money was as good as everybody else's, if we had reasonably courteous distribution, then we should be able to publish it. That experiment is now almost 600 books old. So it has an economy and a backlist of its own, right? The good thing is that over 13 years it still continues to make losses, but less and less and less and less. And I have a feeling that this year we might turn the corner because of the sheer numbers.
Less loss.
Less loss, darling.
And you have the backlist.
And we have the backlist. And about the losses, I mean, I won't get into that just now, but those of you, you know, a conversation afterwards, I'll tell you about the politics of losses at the Man Booker International and its ability to be wonderfully racist. But to come back to this whole thing, it's kind of works. Most people are only doing front lists, right? We straddle all of these things in an effort to open up one more potential space for the books, right? And what is very interesting for me is that these books are also subsidized here. And that's a personal choice. These are not profit centers. The Indian price is $5 compared to the $27.50 for a book there. That is a romance thing because no mathematics there. It's just a notional idea. Oh, I'm cross-subsidizing this because the dollar will fund the rupee. Actually, it doesn't. What it does over time is we're discovering that in India some strange translations from all kinds of European nations is being read in small town India. Lots and lots and lots. I'm finding it more and more and more, and it's increasing. It's almost becoming viable independently, which it didn't set out to do. So I'm not suggesting that everybody start to open up various fronts and all the rest of it, but that was a strategy at that point that we would publish world literature in a certain kind of way. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, and there's also an interesting sort of counter-imperialistic imperative there, which is that
Which is
you're taking the word back.
Which is good copy afterwards, but when you set out to do it, it wasn't really just survival.
Would you like to answer Urvashi's question?
So, I mean, we opened various fronts consciously right from the beginning, because when we opened the first publishing house in 1987, which was called Noir-sur-Blanc, it was to cross borders and to actually translate into French for the whole French-speaking market. Eastern European literature, because at the time the Berlin Wall was still standing, and it was not so easy to get, good young authors. Classics, of course, you got, but good young authors back to the European market. and right at the beginning, we decided we would soon open an office in Warsaw, when it would be possible to do the reverse, so then we started publishing in Polish. At the beginning, practically no French authors, but people like Henry Miller, Paul Auster, Andrea Cabilel. Then we started lighter things as well. And in Poland, we became a very important player in the sense that we wrote books that never seen before. Like Charles Bukowski, in spite of his Polish-sounding name, had never been published in Poland. But he was German, of course, by origin. So I was very conscious. And then in the year 2000, when we acquired Michalski-Hoffmann, then it was in order to enter the French literature market, which we had not touched before. And Michalski-Hoffmann had a reputation for publishing world literature from the beginning, and we went on with that. And this is where we published lots of Indian authors as well. And I started becoming a regular in the Jaipur festivals. So.
Yeah.
Just something again that she said, which was very good. This whole business of sustainability, both as a business model or whatever, usually, and correct me if I'm wrong, it tends to overlook the fact that sustainability in the first instance should also have to do with content. It's what it's the content that sustains you, both you, the individual, and all the relationships you spawn, and you as a company. And so what I would want to ask you from your, the sort of responsibility that you have as
always the counter-imperialist.
No. No, but seriously, I'm interested in knowing, because we know that there are pressures for major corporates to publish more and more and more titles each year, with maybe smaller print runs, because you're having to number crunch in a different way, perhaps, from smaller independents. So it would be interesting to know your own balancing act, which I salute the fact that you do this pretty well, which is the kind of books that you do and the kind of books that you have to do to sustain those. So it'd be nice to know what you.
So that's a really interesting point. Many years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, I was having a chat with a publisher who had been in the industry for at least three times the amount of time that I've spent in the industry now, and therefore had voluminous experience. And he said to me something which I've never forgotten. He said, "Look, Mansi, you can either be the kind of publisher for whom 20% of your books will pay for 80% of the books that you publish, or you can be the kind of publisher where 80% of your books will pay for 20% of the kind of books you publish." So it's that is the balancing act. So that's also the difference between, do you want to make a little bit of profit or a lot of profit? Do you want your books to pay for themselves, or do you want some big sellers that subsidize all the not so big sellers that you do, or do you want a lot of big sellers so that you are able to publish a couple of passion projects that are in fact loss-making projects? And this is a question I ask myself over and over and over again. Because of the kind of work that I now do, I also have to plan budgets well in advance and targets well in advance, and I look at a year in review and say, how much has this contributed to my top line or my bottom line, and so on and so forth. And so this is the question that comes back to me when I do these sort of deep-seated analyses. And I think I've ended up being the kind of person for whom 20% pays for 80%. And that's the simplest answer I can give you.
Urvashi, you want to say something for that? I've just taken over a role for a bit.
No, I think let's roll back to Manasi.
Okay, so I am first of all astonished at the flurry of optimism from the three of you at this point about the state of publishing, and I mean also the fact that you're constantly agreeing with each other, so which means that none of you want to have a fight on this stage.
I was thinking of that.
But I do want to inject a little bit of cynicism into this as well. So, like you did with the opening remarks, can I hear a little bit about this thing that you love, which is publishing and making books? What do you not love about it? And feel free to give me as many as you like.
Well, I think there's many things that I personally don't love about it. One of them is that banks will not give you loans the moment you tell them you're going to print on paper. If you tell them you're going to keep blank paper, then they'll give you loans. But the moment print enters the paper, so from the start that's kind of doomed. I don't love about it, but I'm a realist, so it's okay. The fact that publishing pretends to be without politics, but it's actually, every publisher's stance is very deeply thought out politically, whether it's liberal or otherwise. So publishers like us, who wear our politics on our sleeves, are seen to be doing something that's not quite right for publishing because we're not objective. But that's okay. I mean, as I said, I'm a realist and that's how the world is, and you have to accept that, but you don't have to like it. What I don't love about it is, dare I say it, many of my authors drive me up the wall. And the mystification of publishing is that publishers are the thieves who are making money off of the authors, and they are undercutting and underpaying authors. And I think the culture, which to me is completely foreign to Indian publishing, but has been imported quite successfully to the detriment of many smaller independent publishing houses, the culture of offering huge advances, which are 99% of the time never recovered, but which really spread in the minds of the authors this thing that publishers have tons of money and my books are earning so much money, and set up a hostility between the author and the publisher, which to me is very unproductive, because we are all in the same business. Everybody wants those books out there, and if that's the basis on which you understand or which you begin, rather than saying, oh, you are making all the money and you're not paying me any, and look at X publisher who's offering X advance to XYZ, that is to me something that worries me. I mean, other than that, there are many things that publishers do, like publish rotten books written by film stars who don't know how to write a sentence, but that's okay. I think that's their choice. You can't really grumble about that. It's not the kind of publishing I would choose, but who am I to impose it on others? So those are your personal and political choices, but there are some things about this profession that, yes, I really don't love. And I don't love the fact that there aren't still enough women in it. So most of the people we have to deal with are men, which is again okay, but deeply patriarchal men. So who think that the kinds of subjects in publishing that women now are quite professional at, like printing, are too technical and women don't understand. So they'll always be trying to tell you that, oh, this kind of paper doesn't take this kind of ink, but we know it, we've learned this. So those equations worry me, but that's because I'm a raging feminist. So.
Okay, I want to come back at some point to the point you raised about higher advances, but Naveen, would you like to tell us about what you know?
She's articulated most of the pinpricks that I treat as pinpricks in a certain kind of way. I'm not sure about like and dislike, because it's kind of black and white, and it borders on the loose remarks that we make often, say, oh, I hate this or I hate that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to think aloud just now, and so it's not a completely thought out thing. But Where I personally get affected, and Shurandri knows about this, is a kind of... So I've spent 36 years desperately trying to be community. Not just within the Indian context, but within the world context. And be community by signaling which retrospectively can be, even though it sounds like a pat on the back, be called reasonably generously being there, supportive ideas, or whatever. It's just like a common pot. And sometimes I've had my bluff called, even financially or for equipment and so on and so forth, but one does it because one wishes to do it. It's for one's self. So, whereas one faces a community which is waiting for the sting, the quid pro quo and so on and so forth, and often there isn't one, unfortunately, because I haven't thought it through. I don't know what I want from you or you, that kind of stuff. If you multiply this worldwide from within, it's a similar sort of situation, that there is not enough community. And yet, ironically, in my opinion, publishing is the one industry that's not really desperately cutthroat. It's not like advertising, where offering Vera more than Urvashi and stealing her away and this kind of stuff. Of course, you lose authors and you win some and you lose some. And I'm constantly spending a lifetime being envious of all the books that others bring out and say, oh shit, I should have brought this one out, that kind of thing. So it's that kind of competition. So I think that's about the only thing that worries me about. I wish there was a way of more bhanchara, as they say.
The one thing that I don't like as well is when they get, one thing I don't like at all is when you see publishers, I think they get their checkbook out and they can pay any kind of advance, and they simply destroy the trust, as very much as Urvashi was saying before. I can tell you of one case in Poland where some of the best authors were publishing with us and were quite happy with the situation and everything. And one day Bertelsmann gets into Poland, decides to have a Polish list, and they simply said, looked at the advances and added 3 or 4 or 5 zeros to the advances. And we knew about it because some of the authors sent back, we got the proof from the author himself that got confused, they're not very good with figures sometimes, and we saw it, And then, of course, corporate logic, after a few years, they went out of the market again, and now slowly these people come back to us, but it's been a very pleasant moment for them and for us. The other thing I don't like, if I can be very blunt about it, I see some French people sitting in the audience, but having started our publishing house in Switzerland, and then coming into Paris, and with a Polish connection and everything, the fact that some Parisians never take us seriously, it's like you're always from the province, So you're trying hard, but you still will not be there. And then when the moment comes for the literary awards, they will not logically think about our books, which are maybe that year better than some other ones. And I find it really infuriating, because it's just, it's just judgment, it's not objective. And but you have to live with it. The third thing I don't like as well is the sort of dependency you have to the commercial side of, like after all you have a distributor. In French you have the salespeople, the diffusion, which are the people who go to the bookstores and sell your books. You are their clients, but they make you feeling like if you were in a begging position continuously. So they give you 4 minutes to speak about one book which would deserve 10. And these things are really infuriating. So last year we finally decided to hire 8 new people and to have our own sales distribution. So now we know at least, we go to the bookstores, we know that they're talking only about our books, and we have the time to explain, and that made a huge difference. Although my director in Paris tells me not to boast about it, because then we would be invaded by people asking us to But I can't help mentioning it because we've seen an immediate result in better sales figures and less returns of books. I'm not familiar with the Indian market. Do you get the returns as well as we do in France? Yeah, which kills, which really difficult.
Yeah, and in fact, the thing that kills more, I think, is sale or return, which is that they buy books from us on a sale or return basis, which it just doesn't seem fair to me at all. I also do want to touch upon some of the points that you made with regard to distribution, but I want to come back to what you said earlier about higher author advances, and I think this is a worldwide phenomenon that certain types of advances skew the market, and I'm not sure that authors I think authors are put in the difficult position of choosing between a lot of money and maybe a relationship in some cases. Sometimes authors get poached. Sometimes, even in the case of debut writers, there's a book that one desperately wants but cannot match the advance that another publisher is offering, and so on and so forth. Can we steer this into a slightly more solution-oriented conversation at this point? Because what do we do about this? How do we approach this problem of higher advances skewing the market, which also ends up creating a misconception about the profitability of publishing, and that is true. I have certainly had conversations with authors where they say, oh, publishers are sitting on pots and pots of money, whereas we poor authors get these tiny advances. So that misconception is one problem. The other problem is that it skews the market to such an extent that it changes expectations, and you're always having write-offs for certain types of authors, and that's not healthy. It's not even healthy for the biggest and highest selling authors, which means at some point it's bound to come back and bite us in the distribution front, or the marketing front, or the sales front. What can we do about this?
My question to this, actually, I don't know why this thing gets caught under my chair every time, even though no, you can let go of it. My question to it is a little more basic. I think what happens with anything is you make a product, you sell it, and you earn money from it, and you take your share of profit. You get a job, you do the job, you finish the job, you get your salary. Here, you turn everything upside down. So you get paid in advance. I agree that yes, writers have spent a long time writing, and that they need to be paid for that, but there is no way an advance will compensate in any case for the time you might have spent, unless you are a really big writer like Jeffrey Archer or Arundhati Roy or something like that. So why is it that we have created this system which sets up the expectation that one of the two parties who will join in the enterprise of putting this creative work out in the world will take all the risks and pay in advance to you? So, and whether that party recovers that advance or not is their problem. And then where does it place the publisher? Publishing is a profession that works totally on credit. So but it works on credit in relation to the market, but it works on cash in relation to the services we buy. So when I print a book, I get 30 days credit from my printer. I have to pay the printer in 30 days. I get 30 days credit from my paper dealer and from my typesetter or wherever I buy those services from. And when I put that book in the market, I have to give 180 days credit. And at the end of those 180 days, I start to get paid for only those books that have sold. And at the end of the financial year, the ones that have not sold are shop soiled, dirty, rubbish, and they come back to me as returns. Now, where is this economy?
And you can't reject these returns.
And you can't. So what are you doing there? When you say what is it that drives you, obviously it's passion drives us or whatever, but it's also idiotic in economic terms. And advances for small publishers, they just skew up the whole business. So what we end up doing then, I've said this again and again, this is not a complaint any longer, it used to be, but what we end up doing is we invest a lot of energy, a lot of time, and a lot of money, but theoretical money, in bringing to light authors who are completely unknown, because the big publishers will not be really interested. Once they're known, appear the advance and the author goes off. Right. So in a sense also for me the skewedness is that it is the small financing the big.
Yeah.
And I don't like that.
Yeah.
So that's why, and I don't know what one can do about it, because it's a whole culture that you need to change. And it's very difficult. So I think maybe you just take it as one of the realities of a business you love, and which you don't like, and which you have to accept and deal with. So no point grumbling about it, but one needs to see the economics behind it.
So Naveen, one of the things which you mentioned, which I thought was very interesting and which I'd like you to touch upon a little bit more, is the sense of community within the publishing industry. How much of a community do you think we all are? Urvashi briefly said that there is a bit of politicking, although no one ever talks about it.
But I do think we're a community.
Right. So can you tell us a little bit about how you feel, and publishing tends to be Delhi-centric, and you come in from Calcutta, which also brings an interesting layer to the whole thing. How do you feel about Indian or international publishing as a community? How supportive are we of each other? You said it's not cutthroat, and I agree with you, but can it be?
I suppose, yeah, I guess it can be, but on the whole, I don't see it as a very cutthroat profession, even though you use the word poaching, which happens, I presume. When I said community, I meant that, okay, so when I started to publish in the 80s, my only act of community that was received was by Rukun Advani, who was then with the Oxford University Press as an editor. Every time I sent him a manuscript, he evaluated it, and 7 times out of 10 he published it. Not because it came as a rejection, but because at that point I had a brief for myself, which is that I was a theatre and cinema and art publisher, and anything outside that, including Yesterday, which will be passed on to somebody, regretted it later, was received on merit. When I did this with other people, it was viewed with suspicion. It started there, and then quantum leaps have happened where some of us as individuals initially, and then as publishers have become family of a certain kind, at least I feel that strongly. I also meant by community that something that happens in the European tradition, for example, is that just the fact of rights managers getting together regularly to discuss how they're dealing with the rest of the world, other than panels and festivals, I mean, sharing information, sharing resources of a certain kind in terms of just so that you help each other along in a kind of way. It's changing, but it needs to change much more. I also find in terms of the politics of the trust, this angle of trust and relationship, I find it less when I'm dealing with American publishing. I find it wonderful when I'm dealing with Europe. There's a sense of being protected almost once they've related to you in small ways. You know, you're offering an advance for a writer and they reduce it by half, saying, oh, she sees you as a principal English language publisher now and she's happy with this. Publishers doing this. And these are major publishers, you know, so not just that, but just information. The flip side of that also is that they pick up the phone, trust, and tell you, you need to do Manasi, she's 28, and we need to publish her now. She's not going to sell, but she needs to be heard in English. And you reciprocate and you do that. So that is also being community in a certain way, where you take risks, or generosity of risk of a certain kind.
So you get Manasi, pass her on to us then.
Yeah. So, you know, so it's a kind of, you know, it's not like a desperate dislike or, you know, but one occasionally sort of gets angsty about the fact that, oh, I wish there would be much more of this in that sense. But yeah, what she articulated was absolutely perfect otherwise.
I believe that trust is a very essential element, you know, and we have quite a few authors that stay with us because they know we take good care of them. We take good care of them. I mean, some they're totally lost when they get a letter from the tax office. They would come to our accounting department, tell us, can you please help me to fill in my tax declaration and things like that. And you know, and we know they would never leave us, even for higher advances, because they feel like it's a sort of family, you know? And they know we try to sell the rights abroad, and not always with success, because some literature doesn't travel as some others do. But trust, I believe, is an important element. This is why maybe I'm too emotional on that kind, but I feel very badly when one author leaves us, one other publisher. For me, it's like, it's like treason, and I really take it personally. I don't know how you it is really something which is very difficult to go by.
Okay, I am really enjoying this conversation, but will somebody please throw something at me when it's time to turn it to the audience? I do want to come back to the point that we have 10 minutes.
I think 10 and then 10 more for questions.
Excellent. So, because I am dying to ask you one more question, which is, you talked about distribution and you talked about how you ended up being your own distributor and making that the solution to your distribution woes. For one thing, I'm not sure that that is a viable solution in a country like India. But for another, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you've primarily worked in markets which have fixed pricing?
Yeah, the French market, of course, but not the Polish.
Okay.
And the Swiss is a very different case. What I meant to say, it's not distribution, it's what we call diffusion. I mean, the people who go to the bookstore then talk about our books. We left the distribution.
The reps?
Yeah, the reps. We left the distribution with a professional distributor, which used to be our previous one, and they just do what you call in French packets and send off the thing. Yeah.
But could you touch a little bit upon the concept of fixed pricing, because it's not something that we're used to in India at all, and obviously you worked in markets where it exists and it doesn't, so it would help us a lot if you could talk a little bit about how that affects the market.
So I believe this is a very positive side of publishing in France, and that it's been ever since 1981 that the fixed price has been a rule. And,
which basically means books can't be discounted unless everyone agrees, right?
Unless after a number of years, and then they can get sold at a sale, in the sale. But for the most of their life in bookstore, they would be at the same price. The case of Switzerland, which is a very small market, it's just about 1.5 million French-speaking people. They, in order to account for higher wages and rents, making bookstore owners' lives more difficult, they have what we call a tabelle, which means that they price up the price of books coming from France, which some people don't agree with, but simply it's a fact. It's a fact for the time being. Then, of course, in Poland they discount that. There's been a lot of work on the French side and different organisms to try to bring this model to other countries, but liberal economy forces are resisting it. So that's something which is on some signs have been positive, but it's not done yet.
And I think you've spent enough time in India for me to be able to ask you this. When you see book prices in India, how do you feel about that? Because books are much cheaper here than they are in any of the markets where you work. At the same time, I don't know how to feel about it. Is it a healthy sign because books are affordable for everyone, or is it an unhealthy sign because it implies the absence of inherent value apart from the actual physical product?
I mean, what I think that when you are in publishing, what you want is books get to readers, I mean, I don't know exactly how the bookseller situation is in India. In France, the fixed price has helped publishers, smaller publishers, and booksellers, And there is an active policy of keeping what we call excellent booksellers alive, helping them to rebuild the shops, helping them to exist.
Yeah.
And most literary publishers work hand in hand with booksellers, and we spend lots of energy and lots of our marketing convincing booksellers, which seem to us as the most efficient people to get the message of our books across, because publicists, of course, are important. We do spend some time and energy on that, but now you know that lots of press does not mean lots of sales. And so it's more important to be active in booksellers.
Okay, I've been told that we should start the Q&A, so I will put away all my other questions for later. So somebody will give you a mic. Yeah, so the lady here.
Hi. I would like to understand how Amazon features in the Indian publishing market. You've talked about advances, we've talked about distribution, and somewhere Amazon turns it on its head anyway. There's also the aspect of self-publishing which is happening through Amazon's portals, and it's not accounted for because they don't share the data. So how is Indian publishing responding to that?
It's got caught in the chair again, see? Amazon, I don't think, I think you need to ask somebody in Amazon, but my understanding of the self-publishing thing based on what we read is that it is growing a lot on Amazon, that more and more people are self-publishing and their books are getting out. Why they don't share data, that's something I can't say to you, you have to ask them. The other thing is, Amazon has bought up Westland, the company of the publishing house company which does print publishing. And I think while Amazon has a particular strength in online selling, they don't have the physical bookshop selling, and they don't have expertise in that distribution. None of us does, but we all are with distributors who have a long track record. So at least they're able to get our books out there. And I think that is a difficulty for Amazon Westland from what I've understood. But again, this is only based on hearsay. And it would be much better to ask somebody within Amazon to tell you that.
And there are plenty of people floating about, so.
I'd just like to make a comment about the fixed book price. We used to have that in the UK, and it was abolished in the early 90s. At the same time, all the independent bookstores shut, because once we lost that, we lost all the independent bookstores. There are very few left, which means that the only outlets for books are the big chains. So now when you go to a publisher with a book, their first question is, can we get this into Waterstones or Smiths? And it's created in the public mind the idea that books should be cheap, 2 for 1, 3 for 2, etc. It's changed the whole culture, and respect to France for keeping it, and other countries, please do try and have it because it's been catastrophic.
Thank you for that valuable input. I think it's France and Germany right now that are still standing on fixed price. Yeah, there's a gentleman here.
Hi, good morning. Great panel here this morning. My name is Lakinder and I'm here from New York in search of a publisher. So I have a question for all of you guys. How many titles are you publishing every year? And how do you do justice to it? Because I've heard 20% of the writers make 80% of the money, the classic 80-20. So how do you justify that? Thank you.
How many titles are you publishing? How do you do this?
We do about 40-45 titles a year, and we try and do justice to each one. 70% of those are translations from different languages, and you decide on that sort of figure because you feel you can devote time and energy, if that's what I understand, to each of those books, in the sense that you promote the books through your distributors, through your reps worldwide. You try and make them visible. Visibility is what is important. The sales will or will not happen, but it's important that the books get visible everywhere, electronically or bookstores, not necessarily in piles and heaps and so on and so forth. Because the nature of the content that we publish is very serious. So it is not every time that the chain will want you, but the independents, become loyal to that sort of a list. So yeah, I think that's roughly what would be true for all of us, because the books we publish are the ones we wish to publish, and therefore you will devote time, energy, ideas, and trying to sort of do that. The trickier one is after the first flush, is to how do you keep those books alive, reinvented? Do you turn hardbacks into paperbacks? Do you turn authors that you have long-term relationships with into other media, whether you do audiobooks or graphic novels, the ones that lend themselves and so on and so forth. So it's a constant churning, introspection, ideas, brainstorming on keeping that alive.
We tell all our authors that we're quite honest about it. So when they come to us, we tell them we love your book to death, but we are not sure we can actually get it out into the market. So make your choice on that basis. Do you want lots of love and attention, or do you want lots of money?
Somebody there. That person is
At
the back.
There's one question coming up here.
Yeah, sure.
So this is a question for Naveen, Urvashi, and Moxie, if you don't mind. If you could, because it's specific to the Indian publishing ecosystem, if you could wave a magic wand and change one thing, improve one thing across the Indian publishing ecosystem, what might that be?
I'm never good at this in the sense that it's exactly, sorry, no sort of disrespect, but it's like being asked, which I used to be, till I became crabby about it, which is, where do you see yourself 5 years from now, or whatever. It's a kind of sense of unveiling. I mean, I don't know, maybe you should attend.
No, it's not specific to you, I just mean across the Indian publishing ecosystem.
Okay, what is the one thing that you could change?
Right, not specific
Okay.
to Seagull or specific to
Oh, okay. Well, distribution for one, I wish. I wish there was, this is a personal pipe dream, so the next 1 hour, excuse me. Some kind of way of setting up a small press distribution network within the country that focused entirely on independence. It didn't need to feed 400 mouths and therefore went after the popular, it promoted, all its idea was being an event manager for the small publisher, so a small tight setup. I miss that kind of thing.
Yeah, and like that SPD in the US, right? Like they have SPD in the US, that would be good.
So because Naveen has said the one thing, I can now say another one. You can take that as said. And I would really like, within the Indian publishing industry, for that industry to become gender sensitive, to open its workforce up to understanding the importance of working well with your colleagues, working with respect, giving your colleagues dignity, and being inclusive, and basically setting in place structures that address the very toxic problem of sexual harassment in the workplace. I do believe, as a strong serving feminist, that changing that will result in a deep change in the quality of what we publish. So if we can have these two things together, we've solved a lot of problems. Vera, what about you?
I just wanted to say that in France we have quite a lot of women, you know, in the publishing world, and actually not only the ones who made their own publishing house, but if I look at the staff in Libella, I mean, the vast majority are women. And the incredibly vast majority, to the extent that sometimes you need to get some physical work, like moving boxes of books, and you know everybody goes like that, because we are short of men to help us doing that.
But you know, in the Indian publishing industry also today, it's true we have large numbers of women. At the time that I joined, you could have counted the numbers of women on the fingers of two hands. 45 years ago. But now, I mean, there are women like young women like Manasi and all her colleagues, older women, women running their own businesses, CEOs of companies, all of that.
So it's changed.
But there isn't that deep gender sensitivity and respect that there should be. So that's what I was talking about. Numbers, I think we have, and they're growing.
And I just wanted to answer the question that was asked before about how many books we publish, which I didn't get to answer. So in France, we publish about, in French, in all the different imprints, some of them which are part of the Libella group and are not really run by us, but they're just part of the group. It's about 300 books a year. And then in Polish, it would be about 200. This is not including reprints and things. So, you know, because we have very different areas, it's not only literature, we music, with a drawing, with a photography, and it adds up quickly, finally.
There's one question there.
This question is especially to Naveen and Urvashi because
Why?
Closer. Keep it closer.
this question is especially to Naveen and Urvashi because from whom, as a first-time publisher, we learned quite a bit last time when we launched ourselves here. 1 year down the lane, there are quite a few challenges that we face, as a publisher. And most of it has been answered, in this interaction now. But this question is, we'd approached the best distributor that there is in India, and we had kind of appointed them to distribute our books last year. Okay. And very recently, they come back to us and say that because of some change in the government policy, about 220 to 230 Indian-based publishers, they are not distributing anymore.
Huh?
Yeah, okay.
Who's this? This is, we're all interested to know.
It is IBD, and I have a mail, from them to this effect.
Share it.
In India, IBD, and I have a mail to this effect saying because of a change in the government policy, that they're not going to, they've dropped roughly about 212 Indian-based publishers and their distribution. But that's one part of the story. The other part of the story is what Urvashi, had said. After giving them roughly about 1,000 books on each of the titles, because we published about 20 translations and 5 straight English books last year. About 40% of it is sold, and the balance 60% of it has exactly come back to me, the way you said, shop soiled, okay, dirty, and we're very clear that we're not going to distribute those books to anybody, even to children freely, because that's gross disrespect. We've junked those things and we're going for another print. Okay. Can there be, some kind of a solution, or because it's a big struggle for me. How much ever you go and tell the author, okay? Because there is Amazon, there is Flipkart, and at the end of the day, a lot of how you promote yourself through the social media plays a big role, in your book, reaching people. I find it very, very unreasonable because the answer they give me is, they quote 3 of the foreign publishers and say, we have about 25,000 titles of these people, and it's just enough time for us only to distribute these. We do not have time, for any new publisher at all. Which in essence they are saying is, unless a book gets published by in these publishing houses, there's no way, we'll be able to distribute your books. That's what they're telling me, okay? Which means any new budding guy, who wants his books on the stands, okay, it's not going to happen, okay? Can there be some solution or some thought process behind it? Even if 100% is not achieved, some satisfaction for the new author in terms of, yes, we've got it there. Your thoughts on this?
Can I ask you to quickly introduce yourself before they ask the question about your publishing house?
My name is Ramji, and I run this publishing house called 0 Degree Publishing. We predominantly translated about 20 Tamil-based bestsellers into English, and we've also launched 5 straight English books. While I say this, there are still a lot of people who somehow, get to know that we publish books and come in search of us to publish books. If we like it, we go ahead and publish. But honestly, my bread and butter is not dependent on publishing. Let me be very honest on that, because I produce films and that's where I make my money. But from the point of view of an author who comes to me for his book, sometimes I feel it's gross injustice that in spite of a good content, I'm not even saying the books have to sell, that's not in our hands, but the books at least have to be present in a few places, and that becomes so difficult.
I think, at some level, Naveen responded to that question when he mentioned that the one thing that we would want to change is to get better distribution, because it is so important to have good distribution, and there isn't really a distributor in India who can cover the whole country effectively and who can do so by doing justice to all the lists that they carry, large and small. The distributor, I think, needs to understand the importance of having a bibliodiverse culture rather than just selling the big names. And by that I mean not only large and small publishers of books in all our languages and so on, But unfortunately, there aren't distributors who understand that, and we have to really work with that. The other problem that I think arises for people when some years ago we had to change our distributor for our academic books, and we went to a big academic distributor, and he said to us, and this relates to what he said, what is this nonsense? Look at the prices of your books. 695 rupees for an academic book. Why should I sell it? I have a Taylor and Francis book that costs £100. Selling one book with little effort will earn me 10 times. But 10 times the effort to sell 10 of your books, why should I bother? So, you know, this is also, you're caught in a bind, because if you increase the prices, you have buyer resistance, but distributor happiness. If you don't increase the prices, the distributor is not going to get your books out there. So I don't really know what we do, but we struggle with this all the time, and I'm pretty sure all of us struggle with the same thing. This is also part of the business of books. But this IBD thing I wasn't aware of. Please share it with us so that we can at least find out, because I don't understand how can the government impose this on any business. They can't.
Is this some kind of a blacklist?
It sounds to me like it's just something they're saying, not to have to take on more people.
Like
I think Yogesh also was just wanting to say something. Yogesh from Storytel. It's on.
So I manage Storytel in India, which is the audiobook distribution platform. And because we are talking about distribution, I thought I should add something. Because we started 1 year, and already we are at a place where we are selling thousands of books every month, just in 1 year. So for publishers, with some of the other direct publishing platforms that you have said, with us in the game, where distribution is no longer a problem, neither is recovery. It's there for anybody to see. If I take a look at some of my bestsellers, we don't break out India numbers or book numbers, that's a global policy. But if I take a look at my bestsellers, they're already in hundreds of first run copies listened within the first month. So I think that print is of course one way, but there are other platforms. And at the end of the day, in the book publishing, it's always about the numbers, right? If you can get 1,000 listens or 2,000, 2,500 listens, you recover your money. And if I take a look at where audiobook industry is today, and I'm not speaking only about audiobook, I think in a couple of years, just that part will be at a place where any publisher, if they have enough followers, will be able to recover their money from one platform, and that's a direct platform. So things are, there's also a positive side to it.
So I think we'll now wrap up the session.
Thank you.
I think this is an important issue. Thank you for bringing it up, Ramji, because actually smaller publishers like us are facing these problems. Even from Prakash, we can talk about this.
Thank you, Manasi.
Yeah. Thanks everyone. I think it's imperative that we actually take some of these conversations offline as well. So thank you, and thank you so much for